now, flash forward, I had children, a wife, a mortgage, all the things that, needed to get paid.
You couldn't sell the house to get a 2-year runway again.
Exactly. And so I had to make a leap of faith, but I had obligations that I didn't have the first time around. In this market, I think it's becoming harder and harder for agents to develop business. The business, I think, is harder than it's ever been. That agent cut their commission down to a significantly lower commission than I would work for. And so it became, twice the challenge. But in the end, I ended up getting the listing, and it's because I believed that I was the right agent for that particular listing. It's the biggest challenge probably, right? Is getting your client to get on board with the best strategy to get them sort of have an understanding. I want what's in your best interest. And here's actual case study examples of clients who followed the advice. You're not selling this property on your own. You're hiring an expert.
What do you think would impact your business?
I lost my house in the Palisades fire, and I decided that I was going to make up for that and that huge loss by doing as much business as I could do. And I just got down to it and was working as hard as possible. And I put some deals together, some big deals, and they fell apart because the clients changed their mind. And so I can tell you, I've never had a deal not come together when the buyer and the seller, for me to prove just how tough and resilient I am. And so that's what I went with. And I said, you know what? Throw anything you want at me. Make the deals blow up. That's fine. I am going to battle through. I'm going to get this business done. You know what the luxury of actually being wealthy is? If they can afford to keep it, there's a rebirth in a sense when you lose everything and you have a chance to start over. And so, from how you dress to, what you purchase and what you prioritize, you have an opportunity to start over. Who I think underestimated the value that a buyer's agent brings and the amount of work it takes. However, I will tell you, in our business, if you take your foot off the accelerator, your business will go away.
Welcome to All Things Real Estate with Ari Wintraub, a show where we get to meet and learn from players within and around the real estate industry, an industry that provides incredible opportunity for creativity, entrepreneurship, and wealth building. Join me as we learn the tips and tricks from these insiders and helping us to carve out a space within this massive industry. Hey everyone, welcome back to All Things Real Estate. I am your host, Ari Wintraub, and I am very excited to have on today Joseph Cilic, a top residential agent at Sotheby's International Realty here in Los Angeles. Joe, with his extensive background in law, brokerage management, and now running his own very successful team within Sotheby's, he is a wealth of knowledge. I can speak from personal experience, having been hired by Joe when I first came into the business 11 years ago when he was my manager. He always readily shares his insights, tips, tricks, and practices on how to succeed. So whether you're a new agent, a veteran, or anyone working in some sort of sales or entrepreneurial capacity, I know today we will all glean a ton from this interview. Before we get into it, I want to please ask, if you haven't, subscribe, like, follow, and review the show. And without further ado, Joe, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Ari. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome, man. I'm excited to do this.
For sure.
To kick things off, give us your background, how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, so I graduated law school at UCLA, and I went to work as an attorney, and I was representing residential real estate companies as outside counsel, including Sotheby's International Realty. And eventually I decided I liked what they were doing more than what I was doing. So I had to make a switch. And I had purchased a condo as a first-year associate. And I liked that experience of buying residential real estate. And I thought that might be something that I can do for a career. And so I took the exam, the broker's exam, and that was my first step towards making the transition. passed the exam, gave my firm notice, and decided to jump in both feet into residential real estate.
Awesome. What year was that?
That was 2004, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you came in as a sales associate with Sotheby's, and you did that for how long?
I did that for a couple years and I was asked to get into management actually right away because agents were coming to me and asking me questions, about the legal ramifications of things. And so I was answering those questions, and the office administrator at the time said, you should get paid to do that. And so they asked me to become an associate manager, and I did that in the Beverly Hills office and eventually took over as the branch manager of our flagship office in Los Angeles.
Okay, so maybe that's around 2006. You said you've been associate selling for a couple years,
Mm-hmm.
and then you became the manager,
Yeah.
and you did that for how long?
I managed the Beverly Hills office, and the office was growing. It was a well-oiled machine, and we were doing quite well, and the market was good. And I then said, I want more of a challenge. And so at the time, we had a vacancy in Brentwood. And I said, I'd like to manage Beverly Hills and Brentwood. And they said, okay, we got some news for you. We're going to give you Brentwood, but we're taking Beverly Hills away. So I ended up managing the Brentwood office, and that's when the market shifted. So I managed for about, I think, more than 12 years as a branch manager. And then in addition to that, as an associate manager. And so I was in management for quite some time, but it moved from Beverly Hills to further west to Brentwood, and then managed some other offices like Westlake and Palisades from time to time.
Great. Yeah, we're gonna get into some of that and all the experience and insights from running an office. And then at what point you transitioned back to being an agent?
Yeah, yeah. It's one of those things where I felt like I was up for the next challenge, and I was looking at the agents in the office, doing well, and I thought, I think I can go back to sales and actually do quite well and become a top agent. And the difference between the first time that I stopped a paycheck and this time was when I was younger and I quit practicing law, I had no obligations.
Right. You had the condo.
Yeah, I had a condo, which I ended up selling so that I had a 2-year runway.
Right.
But now, flash forward, I had children, a wife, a mortgage, all the things that, needed to get paid. And
Yeah.
so
You couldn't sell the house to get a 2-year runway again.
exactly. And so I had to make a leap of faith, but I had obligations that I didn't have the first time around. And so to some extent, it was a bigger risk.
Yeah. And maybe what ultimately led to you becoming such a success again as a sales associate, because you had that obligation and that risk. And I know we're going to, touch deeper on a lot of that. But let's now look at what you have as a business. So you're running a team called the Cilic Group within Sotheby's. What's that structure like, and what does that mean to have a team?
Yeah, yeah. So mine is kind of a hybrid at this point. And so I bring in a lot of the business, and a couple of my team members are really now focused on helping me with my business. Everybody on the team's encouraged to bring in business, but in this market, I think it's becoming harder and harder for agents to develop business. And so what I'm realizing is I'm bringing in more and more of the business, and I need help servicing it. And
Right.
so a couple of the team members are dedicated to that, whereas the other team members are really still developing their own business, and then I help them with my experience in, getting that business and getting it to the finish line. And so it's kind of a hybrid with a lot more of the business actually coming in by me and then me getting help servicing it.
And it sounds like through a natural progression, you've established that, because the traditional team format is you have a bunch of other sales associates who are out getting business. You enjoy part of the, commissions and splits with them, but they're not there to support you or do administrative work or marketing. But that's maybe what you shifted into, possibly as a result of the interest rates going up and the market tightening and harder to grow business.
Yeah, I think that it is hard. The business, I think, is harder than it's ever been.
Really?
And, that's not to discourage, agents from it, because it's still an amazing business. But I do think that it's a challenge right now, especially in the Los Angeles market. And so every market around the country is different, but the Los Angeles market has been challenged for a few years now. And I think it is quite challenging as somebody who doesn't have a big book of business
Yeah.
to get that business.
I don't think it's just an LA thing, because at Sotheby's, we have the luxury of communicating with agents that are our colleagues and partners across the nation and the globe. And often the conversation since 2022 it's been tight inventory, buyers are on the sidelines and such. So that's really interesting to hear how that has, caused your team to develop in that way. And in a sense, you could be called the rainmaker. You're the one bringing the business, and we're going to touch on, how you go about doing that. And what the first question, spinning off of that is, like myself, I see that you sell in all areas of the city. You are not exclusively an expert in only selling within, one neighborhood. And so often I find when meeting with sellers, if we've not sold next to no properties in a certain area and you're going up maybe the local expert, how do you offset those challenges and, sellers thinking that maybe you're not skilled enough in that area?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And it does come up. It came up recently on a transaction. And not only did the area expert, the agent who had the most sales in the neighborhood, was in competition with me, but that agent cut their commission down to a significantly lower commission than I would work for. And so it became, twice the challenge. But in the end, I ended up getting the listing, and it's because I believed that I was the right agent for that particular listing. And that listing was an architectural listing. It had a famous architect behind it. And I had sold another home done by that architect. And I leveraged that, and I leveraged my overall reputation for getting, top dollar and getting transactions done for these clients in a way that was not going to be hard on them, and they cared about that. And so I went with the idea that I'm the right person for the job. I beat out 5 agents on that, including the local one. And,
Yeah.
and I truly believed I was the right one, and I got it sold pre-market, all cash deal, easy transaction, and they were thrilled.
Yeah. Who's the architect?
It was A. Quincy Jones.
Okay, right. So this is a Brentwood. It was a Crestwood Hills.
So I'd had a Crestwood Hills sale of A. Quincy Jones, but this one was actually in Cheviot Hills. So in Brentwood, I have a huge track record of sales, but in Cheviot Hills, I don't. Now, I've sold some homes there, but not nearly as many as the agent I was competing against.
Right. So not being a local expert, you offset that by being an expert in this particular type of architecture. And then also what is interesting, hearing you talk about how you were the right agent for that seller.
Yeah.
Because, you could be sympathetic to their needs, and you had the right, personality match.
Yeah, I thought I was the right agent for it. And there's transactions, there's other ones that, definitely where I feel like I'm the one. And so you really should be listing with me. I believe it to my core. And because of that, they believe it. And there's listings where, frankly, I'll do a great job, but I cannot say that I am the one agent that's meant for that listing. But it doesn't mean that I can't sell it for them. But there are some listings where I truly, truly believe they really should list with me. And in those instances, I typically get those listings because I think they feel it and believe it too.
Yeah. It's great to hear that. I often am in that situation. And, I reflect on, other top agents like yourself in the city. They sell all over Southern California. They're not, an area expert. And it's the fact that they know how to transact. They know how to, represent a deal, market it, understand the qualities of the house that makes it most important. Going back to this idea about connecting and having the right, relationship with the seller and understanding the way that they want to operate. Oftentimes, I find the toughest negotiation that I have is with my own client around prepping the house correctly or pricing it appropriately. How do you navigate those conversations while at the same time not alienating them, but setting everyone up for success?
Yeah, it's the biggest challenge probably, right? Is getting your client to get on board with the best strategy to get them the best price for their property. And that doesn't always mean listing it at the highest price. And it doesn't always mean that, even though they want a low friction transaction, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't prepare the home for sale, because you can not prepare a home for sale and have it on the market for a year and have to deal with showings for a year. Or you can spend 3 weeks prepping the home and get it sold in a week and not have to deal with the headache that comes from having your property on the market for a year. And so,
But they may be meeting with another agent who's telling them something completely different. Oh, you don't have to stage. We can get photographer here next week and put it on the market, and I can sell it more from what you're telling them they can sell for.
yeah, of course. And that's a big challenge. And then it comes down to trust and credibility, right? And so I think you have to sort of have an understanding of, okay, I want what's in your best interest. And here's actual case study examples of clients who followed the advice, and here's the result. And so I'll do it before and after, and I'll show the broker price opinions on a property before it was prepped for sale, and then the result that we got after we prepped it for sale,
Right.
and show that that property sold and it exceeded the wildest expectations of the seller because we went through this. And I can demonstrate that with an actual property, show them before and after pictures of it, and show them the result and that came from the staging. And so, I think showing them examples certainly helps. And then, understanding that I could tell you the same thing, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. I could tell you, put it on the market, don't do anything, because that's what you want to hear, but that's not going to get you the best result. And
Right.
so if you want me to go along with that strategy, I can do that. But I actually am trying to add value to the situation. You're not selling this property on your own. You're hiring an expert. And if you're not going to listen to the expert's advice, why hire the expert? And so I think that you have to, in a nice way, explain that either I'm going to add value or you shouldn't be hiring me.
Right. Exactly. I love that. There was a lot of stuff there around doing it in a nice way. You don't have to strong arm. You say, I could do it your way. Like, it's fine. We cannot stage it. But it's first and foremost, you said at the onset about building the trust. Steve Moritz, who is, my mentor that you linked me up with when I came to your office in 2014, I hear him often say he is able to get the strategy established with the seller on price and presentation after he gains their trust. And once you can do that, they're on board and they're going to follow his lead. And that's, probably why he's one of also the most successful agents in the West Side. So
Yeah. Totally.
I love that. And it's a great reminder. But let's proceed. So I got this next question about the losses and the knocks. As our manager, you would periodically remind us that it's very important to take a day, recover from a loss, and then you got to get right back up and get out there again. Let that be a listing you don't get, or a major deal that's in escrow that falls apart, or you find out your best friend selling a house or buying something they didn't use you. Now that you're selling again, you're back out in the trenches. How are you handling that?
Yeah. And I've dealt with all of those things, and all of those things this year,
Oh, wow.
more so than ever. And so I lost my house in the Palisades fire, and I decided that I was going to make up for that and that huge loss by doing as much business as I could do. And I just got down to it and was working as hard as possible. And I put some deals together, some big deals, and they fell apart because the clients changed their mind. And so I can tell you, I've never had a deal not come together when the buyer and the seller wanted to do the transaction. The seller wanted to sell and the buyer wanted to buy. I will make that deal happen.
Right.
But if one of the parties doesn't want to do the transaction, then that's a challenge that you cannot overcome in the sense that if they're dedicated to the fact that they're not selling their home anymore, I cannot change their mind on that, and the transaction goes away. And I had some major hits this year with transactions falling apart, more so than ever in my career.
Right. And with more need, like you're alluding to, having, lost your home, needing to really rebuild.
Yeah. And just wanting the win, right?
Right.
So if you work super hard, you just want the win to keep you going to work so hard, right? Because you want that success to help you, fuel you to move forward. And I was just getting gut punch after gut punch. And you know what I said? I said, you know what? This is an opportunity for me to prove just how tough and resilient I am. And so that's what I went with. And I said, you know what? Throw anything you want at me. Make the deals blow up. That's fine. I am going to battle through. I'm going to get this business done. And that's finally, what's bearing out this year. And frankly, I'm ahead of the entire year of last year already. And we're just, halfway through the year. And that's because those hits kept coming and coming. And I just said, I am not going to let it stop me. I'm going to keep powering through.
I love it. So what I'm getting from that is the knocks almost make you more resilient, and they motivate you even more. When you have, I think I know one of the deals you're talking about where the seller changed their mind. They had two lots in Brentwood next to each other. You're looking at a $6 million transaction and it's gone. So, how do you get that back? You got to set your sights on something higher.
Yeah.
So specifically to that, let's say you do have a buyer and seller that do want to transact. Before they tap out, they're stuck maybe on price. What is a term or a strategy that you've been able to keep a deal together when, there's a gap on price, but there's other ways to make the deal work? What are some great, memories of that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you get in a position where the buyer is firm on their number and the seller is firm on their number, and you got to figure something out. And so what I've been hearing a lot more recently with my sellers is I can afford to keep the property, right? I don't have to sell.
Right. They may have a low interest rate from a few years ago.
Sure. Or they have plenty of money and this asset is not going to change their lives either way. And so they say, look, I can afford to keep it.
And it becomes like a pride thing, like in a negotiation.
Yeah. But you know what the luxury of actually being wealthy is? If they can afford to keep it, they can afford to part ways with it and to sell it.
Right.
And to have it off of their plate. Because the one thing that a property does when you're not using it is it takes up time and resources. And so
headspace.
It's a liability in their life. Whether it's a liability from an economic standpoint, that's a different question. But it's definitely a liability in their life because they're dealing with it. They're paying insurance on it. They're paying property taxes on it. They're dealing with issues because of something happening in that neighborhood, and they're not utilizing the property. It's time to sell and to move on and to clear that mental headspace that that property is taking up. And so I do focus on a little bit of that and the fact that they can afford to part ways with it from a seller standpoint.
Right when they tell you, I don't need to sell it,
Right.
you have the inverse takeaway, which is that means you can afford to sell it at a loss.
Yeah, you can afford to sell, and not just at a loss, right? Because some of these properties they've owned for, 30 years. So it's not a loss. It's less than the number that they had in their head, the
Okay.
fictional number that they had in their head. I want to sell this for $5 million and I don't want to sell it for anything less.
Right.
Now they paid $800,000 for it, right?
Okay.
So they're not taking a loss here, but now, someone's willing to pay 4.8 for it. And they're thinking that's 200,000 less than my, number that I came up with in my head that I want for it. And it's a game, right? It's a game to people who have money. And so one of the things is realizing, okay, that's a game for you and it's a sport that you want to get your number. But let's talk about, how this property is really impacting you.
Yeah.
And maybe it makes sense for them to hang on to it if they have a different use for it. And I'll have that candid conversation. Maybe it is worth keeping and that they should hang on to it. But most of the time I find it's time to part ways and they're just having a hard time doing that because they want to feel like they win. And so I think you got to try to find a way where they're winning.
Right. And so let's get into like the details on that. So if it's not going to be just about price, they want to see some terms improve, or the length of the deal.
Right.
What else can be incorporated? Anything come to mind that you've as a mechanism that's been working for you? With a higher interest rate, some people are having the sellers pay down the buyers rate.
Yeah. You can get creative with that stuff. You could also do seller financing in some instances where the seller has money, they don't owe money on the property, and maybe the buyer would be paying a 7% interest rate, but the seller's fine with a 5% return. And so then the buyer can pay their price and the seller is carrying a note on it and they're getting their 5% return, which is, real estate is, at least it's a solid asset, right? And so, if you're putting your money in the stock market or in some sort of CD, you might feel safest with a 5% return on real estate and that asset. And worst case scenario, you can take that property back if you need to.
Yeah.
But the most likely scenario is you're getting paid back at your interest rate and eventually the buyer will pay you off.
Yeah.
And so that's another thing you can do creatively.
Yeah, I've often, thought about that, but never been able to get it to work. So going back to, you shared terrible loss in January, losing your guys' home in the Palisades fires. So what is the rebuild and recovery for you, and what's your guys' plan? And then secondly, where do you see the neighborhood in a few years from now?
Yeah. So, we're trying to figure out if we can trade lots. So we love our neighborhood and we definitely want to rebuild. We're trying to figure out if we can get a little bit of a larger lot since we're about to go through a build process. Ideally, we'd have a little bit of a better property to build on.
And you have money from the insurance to go buy something new.
Well, not really is the answer to that. So my insurance coverage was about half what I needed to rebuild my house.
Yeah.
And so I took a pretty massive hit on that. And so that's one of the things I would say is make sure that you're checking your insurance policy and that your coverage is sufficient to cover.
Everyone is now. I mean, I know myself, you would just get insurance to close a loan. You never thought about so much on the replacement cost. Now I'm constantly crunching the numbers on what it's going to cost to build and what we should have. Great advice.
Yeah, no, for sure. And so I didn't have the money from insurance, but I do have money from, my job.
And also, if you sell your lot,
Right. So if I sell my lot, then I can eliminate I have a loan on my property, and so I can eliminate that debt, and then have more resources to allocate to a new one, or I may hang on to my lot and develop it and sell it at the end of the day because it's a super desirable location that I actually love, and I think will do well. So I may end up developing the property and then also buying something to build for ourselves.
right? Yeah, very, very interesting. So it sounds like it may be an opportunity to trade up to a larger lot. If you're going to be developing and building something, you may want the luxury of doing that with more space
Mm-hmm.
and, buying something at a discount.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, look, they don't call it a fire sale for nothing. And so,
Okay.
the lots are heavily discounted in the Palisades, and I'm helping buyers and sellers navigate that right now on a daily basis. Every day, I'm counseling people on, what to do, whether they're buyers or sellers. And the reality is, yeah, there's a big discount right now.
How long do you think it will take for prices to come back on the resale if you're selling to the developer to where they were pre-fires?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think that it looks like this rebuild effort is going to be staggered. And so not everybody is rebuilding at the same time. And so I think it'll depend in part on the overall economy and what interest rates are doing. But I think that there's a big demand. And so I've sold multiple properties that survived the fire in the Palisades and have another one that I have an offer on right now that I'm negotiating. And so there is a demand to be back in the Palisades. And I think that demand is going to be here 2 years from now when the developer finishes their property.
That's amazing. So you're selling homes that weren't ruined in the fires.
Yeah.
What kind of discount, maybe?
Yeah. And so not a huge discount, to be quite, honest with you. I think that there's a demand for, homes in the Palisades. There's not a huge inventory of homes on the market that survived the fire. And, there may be some discount involved, but it's not a significant discount, whereas the lots are incredibly discounted right now.
Because there's a big supply of them.
Exactly.
Right. There's not a big supply of built homes for someone that wants to live in the Palisades.
Correct. Yeah. So it is a supply and demand thing.
So personally, what was that like? Like before we got into the show, we were talking about how through Amy, your wife's previous job, you were the best dressed guy in residential real estate. And now all that personal property was ruined and gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was that experience like? I remember you shared, discovering something above the ceiling on the chimney.
Yeah.
And so that just personally, can you remember sharing?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, look, obviously the most important thing, the thing that everyone will say to you when you have something like this happen is, well, thank God, like your family got out of there safely.
Yes.
And that is by far, of course, the number one most important thing.
Yeah.
2 kids, wife, and 2 dogs all got out safely. And so that's number one. But when it starts to sink in that, all of these things that you accumulated over your lifetime. So it's not just, 1 year, 1 month, it's your entire life. The items that you chose to hang on to, whether it's clothes or personal items or things that really have meaning to you, those things are all gone in an instant and you weren't expecting it. And so, to some extent, I probably still haven't processed it all because each day goes by and something will remind me of something that I used to have. And we're still putting together that inventory list for our insurance. But yeah, it's hard, but harder for my wife because she had spent her whole life collecting curated, clothing, and she was in fashion.
Yeah.
And so she lost a collection that's irreplaceable. I mean, you cannot replace what she had.
And that's an expression of herself. Michael Smith, I saw post initially after the fires that his clients had the right to be mournful of like their physical possessions being lost because it's an expression of you.
Yeah.
It's like what you said, your wife collected and curated this.
Yeah. Yeah.
At the same time, we were talking about like how it takes you to like this next, phase, right, where we're talking about, you're not suiting up as much now. And so you're, in this new realm. And there's, like artists sometimes talk about like, some of the great writers and Hemingway and Herschel Gorky, these artists that lost all their work in fires.
Yeah.
And how it maybe, gives you a new starting point. I don't know if there's anything you glean from that.
Yeah, no, I mean, in some ways it is a rebirth, and you alluded to the chimney, fireplace thing where the fire burned, and it revealed a saying that was written in a place that wasn't accessible to us before, and it talked about love and how love is blind, love is
It's a Bible verse, right?
It's a Bible verse about love. And so, there's a rebirth in a sense when you lose everything and you have a chance to start over. And so, from how you dress to, what you purchase and what you prioritize, you have an opportunity to start over. And so with a fresh slate. And so, I, look at that as an opportunity to think about what's really important and what's not important. And so I'm replacing the things that are really important to me and letting the other things go and realizing that, I don't need those. I don't need 30, Ralph Lauren suits because I'm not wearing a suit every day. And so I won't be replacing all those. But it's interesting because I'll get invited to a party and I'm like, oh, I have the perfect outfit for that. And then I say, oh, I do not have the perfect outfit for that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like that imagery of, the drywall, the ceiling is exposed and you're revealed to something new. And then how just through your sales and transactions, you had to dig deep.
Yeah.
You had this need because of that. And you're building back out, and it reinvented you and drove you to a next level and gave you that inspiration. And we'll come to that and on another question that I like to ask everyone in the end. So get me back to the brokerage stuff. Let's touch on commissions.
Yeah.
So LA is a competitive market with a lot of realtors competing for deals. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes we're faced with compromising our standard of what a proper compensation should be when representing a client. How do you stand up for that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think about how hard I work in these transactions. And if I think about that and think about how hard I'm working and how upset I would be if I was working that hard for lower than what I believe is a fair compensation, that motivates me to say no. Like, I have to, there is a minimum that I'm, willing to work for, and I'm not going below it because I'm worth it.
Yeah. It's very easy when you're sitting at a table in a $5 million house with a seller and they're close to hiring you and they ask you to discount a half a point in commission. But you have the fruition to say, okay, yeah, easy to do that now. But what's it going to be like on a Sunday night when you're hammering away on a request for repair to defend them and save them that money, or, multiple open houses, month in, month out, and the constant texts and the experience that you're going to bring to the table. So I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And look,
It's really hard to.
yeah, it's hard to do in the moment, but you have to be confident that you're also going to add more value than that discount. And that I feel so strongly about that in a transaction, if you hire me versus the person who's willing to discount below the fee that I'm willing to take, you are going to get an outcome that's worse. You just are. You are going to net worse and you're going to have a worse time selling the property. It's not going to be as pleasant as it is with me. And I believe that. And because I believe that, I think I convey that to the seller. And, some clients, all they care about is the lowest commission, and they may not be the right client for me. But most of them care about netting the most money. And those clients are the right clients for me.
Yeah, that's great. That's something I remember you instilled in me as a new agent. And it's a constant reminder. It's like demonstrating that trust at the onset with the seller about price and preparation. It's the same in this instance. Like, do you trust me to net you the highest amount?
Yeah.
Or are you just focused on paying the lowest commission?
Yeah. And look, and I tell them, if you truly believe that there's an agent who's a better fit than me because they're going to get you a better result, and they're charging more than me, you should hire them, right? You should hire the person who you have the most confidence in that's going to get you the best result. And the 0.5% in commission, 1% in commission, whatever that is insignificant in comparison to choosing the right person to work with.
Yeah. And around commissions last year, a year ago, August, the National Association of Realtors settlement created new laws and practices around buyer's agent compensation, which for me, reflecting back to a year ago, it was like, what the hell's going to happen?
Yeah.
I am wondering, how you've seen that change and if you've found it challenging navigating it or if it's not turned out to be as much of an impact.
Yeah. So it hasn't been much of an impact, frankly. And I think that that's what we've seen. And to the dismay, I think, of the DOJ and also the consumer, advocates who I think underestimated the value that a buyer's agent brings and the amount of work it takes on that side of a transaction. And so the one thing I like about the changes is a buyer now knows, as they should, how much their agent's getting compensated, and they can set that amount regardless of the fact that the seller's going to pay it. They can determine how much their agent is going to get paid, and they know what that amount is. And I think that that's fair, and it should work like that. However, the buyers are saying it is worth paying my agent the fee that they were getting prior to this settlement because they do so much. And what people don't understand is, as a buyer's agent, you're not just getting paid for that transaction. You're getting paid for the 5 buyers who you were working with who decided not to buy something. And so there's no way we could put in the time and energy into a buy-side transaction if it was a minimal compensation, because so many times a buyer doesn't end up following through and purchasing.
Right. And it's also that knowledge and experience of knowing the market from working with those buyers that maybe don't close that is going to help you serve the one that does.
Totally. Yeah.
I like it. I like the fact that, you're getting the commitment, we're getting the buyer representation agreement. I think that the buyers are more prepared to win when they show up with an agent that they're committed to. It looks better when when they come to an open house, that they sign in. Everyone used to be loosey-goosey before. Sign-in sheet, no agent. Now it's different, and it seems a lot more, productive.
Yeah. So it had, a positive, outcome. Although, not, I think, perhaps the desired effect that some were hoping for. But I think it's actually made things better. And in some instances, on a buyer fee, you may end up getting more than you would get in the past.
Right.
And deservedly so in many cases.
Yeah. Interesting. There's many things that I admire about you and why I've always called you one of my key mentors is the fact that you've constantly been involved in charity work. Even when you were a manager and maybe not needing to network as much, you were always on a board involved with charity, and it inspired me to start trying to do the same.
Yeah.
So what has that experience been like? What's drawn you to do that? And how's it impacted your life and business?
Yeah. So I would say, with getting involved in nonprofits and charities, do it because you want to do it. Do it because you believe in that organization and the good that it will create. And so that's what I've done is I've leaned into, causes that I really believe in. And I've gotten involved and I volunteered and at times spent a lot of time and energy on it.
This is being on the board.
Yeah, being on a board and volunteering. I donate, money. I probably donate more money now, and less time.
Right.
But I've gone through phases where, I would spend 40 hours in a week
Wow.
working on charitable, a board. And I'm not doing that right now, but I am, donating some money. But I would say that you have to care about the cause, and you're around people who, when you're doing that, you're around other people who care,
Right.
and other people who are generally successful. Because a lot of people who join a charity board are successful at something, right? They're successful at their other career. And so anytime you're around successful people, you can learn from them, and they can also become clients.
Yep.
Frankly.
Yeah, it's true. Like I said, you've inspired me to do that, and I've seen that exactly so in the board that I'm on now. It's not necessarily just the success people have on a monetary level, but just the successes that they are in, running a board and their administrative skills and their budgeting and their capacity to convey ideas and get people behind you. And it's great. So thank you for that. And
Yeah, no, thank you for doing what you do, because it's really, it's great to see that, you've jumped in and you've done such a great job. And so you're inspiring me to do, more of, I think, what I inspired you to do.
that's great. I'm laughing because I remember I have this memory of us loading in a box of donations food into your, two-door, sport coupe Audi that we had collected in the office. And for some reason, we were loading into your car for the food bank one night. So
That's funny.
that was great. What's a wild deal that you want to share? Like any crazy transaction or someplace you've been at some point in time and you're like, what is this? Like,
God, there's been so many. There's just been so many wild things, from, what I thought was a dead body wrapped up like a mummy to banks shutting down right before we're supposed to close a deal and, borrow money from them. And
Okay, let's break these down. Now hear about the mummy first.
yeah, I was closing on a deal, and it was the final walkthrough, and I went to this to the guest house in a property, and I opened the door, and there was a body, and it was wrapped from head to toe, all in white. And I was like, oh my God, somebody dumped a body at this property.
Yeah, how did the inspectors not notice that?
And well, it wasn't there before.
Okay.
And so, we're about to close the deal, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So I'm like, well, maybe somehow it's like alive. And so I kind of nudged it, nothing, nudged it again, nothing. So I nudged it harder, and it made a noise.
What?
And I'm like, oh my God. And so as it turned out, it was a person who had gone in there and gotten cold. And so they wrapped their whole body, including their face and their head, in white towels. And so it just looked like it was a body, and it was a
Right.
person.
That's how I look when I sleep. I bundle up and pillows over my head.
Yeah. But this was on the floor in a bathroom in a guest house, and so not what you're expecting to find. And anyways, I escorted the gentleman out, and let him know that he was not to come back.
Yeah.
And
That almost is on par with one of your team members, Kevin Kelly, and I, at the start of last year. He was selling a home in Little Holmby, and we showed up, and there was an intruder who had been squatting in the house, and he fled and dinged up both of our cars, and
yeah.
no one was hurt. But tell me about the bank. It sounds like a while.
Yeah, no, I mean, we were trying to close a big deal right before ULA, and Silicon Valley Bank, failed. That week that we were supposed to be, getting this deal done, which made a lot of the other banks also freeze and not want to do, big loans. And so in that instance, I had to pivot to seller financing.
Wow. Okay.
And we got the deal done, but we got it done right before ULA because there would have been an extra $2 million tax consequence that would have blown our deal up. And so that was a challenging deal. And I've had a number of challenging deals where we've had to work through weird things. But like I said, we always make it work if the buyer and the seller still want the transaction. And so we got through that one.
Yeah. And that goes back to the compensation. You got to be in front of it. If you're in the background and just waiting for the check when the deal closes, when in the 11th hour shit hits the fan, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
You got to be in there constantly available, looking at the situation and ready to keep the deal together. I often see that there's a balance with any business owner between enjoying the fruits of your labor or reinvesting your income back into your business.
Yeah.
And so you, as a team leader who has a brand, how do you work that balance, and where do you see, when you are putting money back into your business, the best return on that investment?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, look, I think my business could survive and thrive without me spending money on marketing myself and doing some things that I actually do. I think it could still, thrive just because of the way that I do my business. A lot of it's through networking. And so if I shut that spigot off of networking and spending money on networking events, that would have a pretty dramatic impact on my business. So I would say, number one, I spend the money that way. In terms of marketing, I do some online branding and also some in-person branding. And I find that it's good to be a known quantity, especially if it's in a particular marketplace. So for example, Pacific Palisades. So because it's a, defined area, I can spend some money branding myself in that market and have it be beneficial. Whether it actually leads to immediate dollars or not is a different question, but I do find value in that. Branding in terms of the entire Los Angeles market, I think is a challenge. And so I think that I'm better, my better use of my money is going to lunch with somebody and not so much just doing blind marketing in the newspaper, for example, for Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's smart. So specific area, target, it's worth, investing some dollars.
Yeah.
And for you, which makes sense, because the last time I saw you speaking in a Q&A, that week you had 6 of your 7 nights booked for some sort of event or dinner or networking.
Right.
And so that's where you're putting your focus, and that's the area that you have to keep going and what you think would impact your business.
Exactly. And then I throw dollars at that.
Right.
And
course.
it's not every week that I do that. That happened to be a week that I was even more active than usual. 6 out of 7 nights is a lot.
Yeah.
But I do, get myself to leave the house to go to things.
Yeah. What do you think is the best, avenue for that? Is that like a dinner, or is that a networking function? I know you've done networking groups. So, what's the best?
Yeah, I think professional networking really is a good bang for the buck. And that's because the other people there are also salespeople selling something, and they're professionals. So they can relate to you that, look, you're growing your business and you can help them grow their business. And so I think when you're around those people, you'll get the best result. But also, even just going to a birthday party or going to, a lunch with a friend, good things come from it.
Yeah.
And so I believe that, you really need to do that stuff if you want to grow business through referral.
Yeah, makes sense. I had Matt Granger, a title rep, on this show, and he's like the master of, keeping in touch and, great service attitude. And that's what he said he thinks he sees the most successful agents doing, is that they're out there.
Mm-hmm.
They're at the, community events and at the farmer's market, and they're just constantly out there.
Yeah.
So that's great. So going with that question for, let's say, a new agent who's just coming into the business now, where do you think they would want to, invest their time and resources to be successful? What do you think it would be if you were starting today?
Yeah. I think that I would help another successful agent is what I would do. I think that that's the best use of their time, because they're going to learn something, and that's going to give them more confidence. So when I got started, I offered my services to other agents in the office. And if they were going on vacation, I would cover their showings. And, some of them offered me, pennies to do that, like a very small amount.
Right.
But it was the experience. It was the fact that I could say, oh, I just showed a property on that street, yesterday to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that gave me more confidence and credibility. And so I think the number one thing I would do is help another successful agent. The other thing I would do is try to get a group. If I didn't have the money, right? Because professional networking costs some money. But what doesn't cost money is calling your friend who's a mortgage broker, calling your friend who's an insurance agent, and saying, you know what, let's get together once a month and have breakfast. And you don't even have to eat, right? You could show up and not eat, right? And pay zero.
Yeah, get a
but
coffee.
Get the little group together,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what I would suggest doing. And the other thing is, I would get great at something.
Mm-hmm.
So our business, the thing that I like about this business is you're really doing the jobs of so many different professions. I mean, so many different professions are all wrapped up into one for us. And if you can get great at one of those things, becoming a social media influencer is a popular one right now, right? But it could be that you're, the best marketing person. It could be that you're the best negotiator. It could be, there's things that you can be the best at. And if you get really good at one of those things to the point where everyone knows you as the best in that, I think that you can get some business that way. But it does take time.
Right. No, it's a good point. Like, I see some realtors that do a great newsletter every week, and they're just, really good at writing and sharing their, takeaways. Or some people are really great at video. Or, if their angle is investment property, they're really good at going out and analyzing and presenting.
Yeah.
Some people have built their business around working with developers. Nisha at our company, I think that's, her stronghold. So that's great advice. And a lot of stuff you said is very reminiscent, and it's why it's great having you on their show, because I miss you as our manager and as a mentor to have in the office. But a lot of those ideas when I came in about giving backup support to agents who are further along. That's, I think, how a lot of my experience and, opportunities came from. And that was instilled by you.
Yeah.
I was putting signs out Sunday morning at 7 a.m. for Steve, but it got me exposed to things, and I picked up information and got a couple drips here or there and started building a business. And then also that reminder, I remember it came to you, be an area, we talked about being an area expert, find an area. I found an area that was sort of like an up and coming area, and it proved out to be good. It provided like a base amount of deals for me every year, something to rely on. So I love hearing those things again. It's great advice for like anyone that's a veteran that's been doing it. It's a good reminder for new people. So as we look to wind this down, I always like to ask a series of questions to every guest. And so the first one is, where do you want to be 3 years from now?
Back in the Palisades, living in my new construction home, and hopefully we'll be happy there. So that would be the number one thing.
We're not going to see you at the Griffin Club then if you're back in the Palisades.
Yeah. No, we're eager to get back. And I think that I have a chance to take my business to a higher level in the next 3 years. And I hope 3 years from now, I've done that.
So that's on a transaction volume, a sales volume.
Yeah, I think that there's opportunity for me. I think I'm on a certain path, and I think that I can get to a higher level, within 3 years. And so I'm I think determined to get there, but I do need to take care of my family in the process and getting us settled again.
Yeah, of course. It's great because as we talked in the onset, a lot of people are struggling in a harder market, and now you're talking about escalating the business, not just maintaining. So
yeah,
going back 10 years ago, what maybe would you have done different?
Yeah, I would have gone back to sales sooner. So I was managing, and had I made the move back to sales sooner, I think I would have been more established as things, as the business kind of got quite good with that COVID bump. And then I think once you get your business to a top level, I think it's easier to continue to get business. And so I would have been more established had I done it sooner.
Right.
However, I will tell you, in our business, if you take your foot off the accelerator, your business will go away, no matter how successful.
I've heard you say that before.
And I've seen it over and over and over again with other top agents. So you don't just get to the top and then stay there. You get to the top and then you have to work to stay there.
Yeah, look, we've talked about this. These top agents, like veterans, you don't hear their names as much anymore, but Joyce Ray, I mean, like, I met her at an event, and then at like 9 o'clock, she's texting me, working on a deal.
She's still committed.
Yeah, and she's like, how long she's been doing it.
Yeah.
I think that she doesn't need to.
Yeah, there's others like her as well that are still super, super committed, and you see that, and then you think there's a reason that they're still successful.
Because if you're not keeping the foot on the pedal, you fall off.
The business goes away.
Yeah.
It just does.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that from selfish reasons, you did not get out of management sooner than you did, because I, have so much of my success, as a result of you.
Well, thank you. No, I appreciate that. And I'm very proud of what you've accomplished and what you still accomplish. And you have some amazing listings coming, and I'm excited for you. And it does actually give me great pride to know that you and a handful of other agents that I hired into the business are thriving, and you're at the top of that list. And so it's an honor to sit with you here and see what you've become, both from investing in properties and also growing your real estate sales business. Very impressive.
I love that. That's great. Thank you. And thanks for your kind words. And awesome to have you, do this and hear everything. So thanks,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah. No, it's a pleasure.
Good stuff.